a line, a parable line to explain China. There is a danger that some people have been thinking to make China the king of the South. That is not, that goes against the World War's many studies. But I believe it does have its place. Someone asked, if we had studied the lines more closely, do you think that we could have predicted the COVID-19 pandemic? Instead of finding out that the Nethinims had already discovered its historic precedent. In the same way, do you think that a closer study of the lines will enable us to foresee in detail how Trump will win the 2020 election? A closer study of lines will always give more light. We didn't find out about the connection between the Spanish flu and the current pandemic through the Nethinims. It was understood through the lines. It wasn't that we heard the world speak about the Spanish flu and then we connected them on the lines. We saw the pandemic. We went back to the line of World War I, and we saw that it fitted on that line. So I just want to make the point. The Nethinims did not direct us to make that connection. We made it without them. Could we have seen it before? Yes, definitely. It could have been predicted if we had studied the lines more closely. Someone has asked, how do you study inspiration and research topics on the internet without getting confused by all the noise? What media sources do you trust and read and watch for world news? As we see the issues that also exist for the leaders of the Nethinims, we know that we take over that leadership. So whatever message they're getting now, we have to recognize is flawed. Just the exact same way for the priests, our first angel, Elder Jeff, what problem did he have? He didn't know how to use parable methodology. He had his own flaws. So those who lead the world and give them the message that plows, that prepares them for harvest, they're also flawed. So we should always look at external sources as being flawed and investigate. The flaws are not the same between CNN and Fox. They are two different types of flaws. Last year, when we were dealing in such a close and tense battle with the socially conservative elements of this movement, we had to be very emphatic about these two media sources. It was black and white. CNN good, trust them. Fox News, bad, don't trust them. That stands correct. I do not mean to undermine any of that. It was taught from the beginning in 2018. These two streams are not both wicked. Good, bad, black and white. So what I'm hoping people can start to see more clearly now is that they both have issues, but they're different types of issues. Someone that I do respect, when he gives social commentary, described it this way. CNN is bent towards laziness and sensationalism. Fox is pure, dangerous propaganda. So I will go to CNN to find my news. I would never go to Fox. At the same time, you still investigate and aware that you're looking at different people's perspectives. Those two sides have always been compared and contrasted because they are both 24-hour cable news channels. They both fit neatly in the history of their development. They're easy to compare and contrast. The truth is, I rarely, if ever, go to CNN because I don't like cable news. I don't like 24-hour cable news channels. They're built towards sensationalism because they must turn news into something that becomes more so entertainment, and it can create a warped perspective. So if I'm going to do my personal investigation, not everyone is able to access the Washington Post or the New York Times because they require a subscription. It's one purpose of the media broadcast is to get the best articles in front of the people who can't necessarily access subscription, but they are good sources. The Guardian is not a subscription source, but it is a good source. Someone suggested The Intercept. I have not closely used them, but I believe that they are a good source. There are other YouTube channels, videos on YouTube, but separate. PBS, particularly Frontline, do a fantastic job. The New York Times has also put out videos, but yes, someone reminded me the Atlantic is good. There are these streams. You have to be aware that to try and appear balanced, some of them also have pieces written in them by social conservative Trump supporters. So you may still find articles in them that are very biased towards Trump. At least with the Washington Post, I can't remember his name directly, but there's one they put on regularly who is very pro-Trump. So it's still good in any source to try and check who wrote it, when they wrote it, just as if you would for a Bible passage. You check the context, and then because it's not inspiration, you check for bias. There was on the media broadcast last night, there was shared another YouTube channel that gave in about 4 minutes an overview of the Sunni Shia split in the Middle East and then the proxy wars that split was participating in. I think that was the Wall Street Journal. Some of those might require a subscription. I don't have a subscription to them, but they still have YouTube videos that are free to access. So these sources are good, but every source requires an investigation. Brother Esteban asked, in the study of the revolutions in 2020, in the studies of the revolutions, in 2020 was always placed the American Revolution. What is the reasoning? How do we get to place the American Revolution and the battles of Lexington and Concord in the CounterRevolution, Concord and Lexington, in the CounterRevolution part of our line? Is there a watch about this issue? That was done also in October 2018, I think at the very end. And it was done with a certain degree of timidness, partly because Elder Jeff had already started speaking by then and introducing some other thoughts. And I don't know if I've toughened over time or not, but it was presented there. In summary, it was through prophetic time spans, the same way that 2014 was made a midpoint. Particularly the 2019 was brought the 490. You have the 490 the same way you do the 2520, and you get the 245 years. That takes you back to the American Revolution. I don't like giving quick answers to a longer study, so I would recommend that you can go back there to see the Battle of Concord and Lexington. Similarly, for the next question, how do we get the year for Panium 2021? I think a whole study needs to be done on that if we're going to be anchored. So I won't answer that too briefly. That was also presented in October 2018, but it was done in quite a shallow way. Since then, there have been other evidences rise up, particularly through the Millerite understanding of Daniel 11, verse 40 and the 10-year proxy wars. But I would suggest for those studies, for bringing in those time spans and the establishing Panium, I probably won't attempt to do that now. Sister Charity and Brother Blessing have said, in the Arkansas presentations of 2018, you identify the counter-revolution as beginning in 2020 and concluding at the Sunday Law. Today you marked its conclusion at Panium. How are we to reconcile the seeming discrepancy? Well, I don't know how you want to reconcile that because I've said two different things. I can't remember what I actually taught in Arkansas as far as the details of those lines. I know what I have structured written down. I think in the line itself, I'm not sure if I ever actually completed that. No, in its application, I didn't. I would suggest that you can make the argument it doesn't end until the Sunday Law. The same way you can see that the fight between the King of the North and the King of the South didn't end in 1989. The deadly wound is struck, but there's this continuing breakdown death period for the King of the South. Just as you have that for the King of the South, I would expect that that would be mirrored in the Western Front as well. So you should be able to see that that conflict extends until the Sunday Law, both Eastern Front and Western Front. There will not be peace at Panium on either front, but it will be the marking of the deadly wound. Someone is asking anonymously, how long will it be until the end of the world? Specifically, I am wondering how high I should set my education and career goals as I'm looking towards the professional field. We encourage people to we don't encourage people to leave behind their education and their career and those secular needs and those secular studies. If we had have done that 20 years ago, even 5 years ago, we would have been in a difficult place today. It depends on who you are and you're asking anonymously. I don't like answering anonymous questions because I don't know the person's individual circumstances and I could give advice that doesn't suit their individual circumstances. So I would encourage you to speak to someone. You may have a local leadership team. You may have an elder over your district. We have very few of those, if any. You will certainly have a continental elder that you can speak to. I would encourage you to do that and actually explain your personal situation if you have those concerns. In general, we encourage people to continue. That there is not suffering caused in 5 years' time by those who have left behind what could mean secular employment. Someone asks, the shipwreck of Acts 27 symbolizes the destruction of the institutions of the United States and Adventism. Does that mean that we cannot trust any government, health, and academic institutions after the Sunday Law? Or is it the shipwreck only about the American government system? How will these institutions look like after the Sunday Law? Before Vladimir Putin became a dictator, there was presidential elections. After Vladimir Putin became a dictator, there was presidential elections. Before there was a constitution, after there's a constitution. The institutions look like they're intact. What has happened to them is they've been eaten out from the inside. I don't know how many of us are familiar with William Barr. Do we know of William Barr? The Justice Department of the United States, is it still intact? Yes. Yes and no. It's intact, but it's been eaten out from the inside. This is how an institution falls. Those who don't wish to recognize it, they have the ability to deny that. They have the ability to say we have a constitution, we have a Justice Department, we have law and order, we have elections, therefore we are a republic and a democracy. We have a constitution that says we will give religious freedom, therefore we are giving religious freedom. But they have undermined those. It's been eaten out from the inside, as you would imagine a piece of wood by termites, and it does not have integrity. That is what I expect to see after the Sunday law. It's not this complete dismantling of a system visibly. These institutions are the institutions that were to hold up a republic. It's not the health system, the academic institutions. You find them in any country. This is particularly what was meant to hold up the Republican horn of the US government. It's particularly those executive branches. Sister Linda asked about baptism during a pandemic. This is a question that we have. This is a question that we have been asked quite a lot lately because people have some anxiety attached to this. Elder Parminder and myself have said emphatically a number of times, priests should be baptized by 2021. We've said that before the pandemic quite forcefully. There is no reason that someone who is a priest should not be able to take part in baptismal studies and be baptized. There was a fear last year where people said, I'm not baptized by 2019, am I lost? And we said no, specifically November 9. People were afraid if they were not baptized by November 9 that they were either lost or that they did not have the right to be a priest. So we fought against that. Where we have the ability, we should be baptized. Now in the history of a pandemic, it has become more difficult. We should still be able to get baptismal studies to those who need them. There are some difficulties still in some corners of the world feel. But for the most part, we can get baptismal studies to people. We struggle to get people there to baptize them in the immediate. If that logistical issue means that people are not baptized by 2021, that does not impact their standing as a priest, that does not impact their salvation. They will be baptized when the opportunity arises for that to take place. So I want people to see the need, the necessity of taking these studies, the necessity of being baptized, but remove the anxiety that this impacts salvation where they do not have the opportunity to be baptized. How do we know which advices of Ellen White are good? You take them to a line. You see the consistency. I think we need to get used to using our methodology. It's the misusing of our methodology where these methodologies are being treated as philosophies instead of rules by which we take a subject to a line that has led us astray. So when she gives advice, look at its context. Look at all that she says about that advice, bring it to a line and see the consistency through generations. If Ellen White is saying that something is a good advice, we have to recognize that it's just good advice. But how we handle that in today's generation, we need to take to our methodology to. How does one handle equality in a home with methonyms, since we are not to take the message to the world now? How does one behave and practice equality without interfering with them or sparking discussions? I think there was another question about the midnight cry for the world as well. I'll come back to that one. More conscious when I drink now that I can't do it with two hands. I just see all they said about Donald Trump. It's a big glass. I thought they were a bit mean to him, to be honest. How does one handle equality in a home with methonyms? Again, it's asked anonymously, which I understand when it's something so personal. But again, there's so many variations. I know a friend of mine, and it's this way in many homes. His mother is a conservative Adventist, and it's her self-worth to be able to feed her boys. That's where her self-worth comes from. So for him to just go in and take over from her when she doesn't understand, it actually has the effect of hurting her. So it's handled in the right way. I think if we know the person that we're dealing with and the context, then we will understand how to handle the situation. There are so many variations to that question. I think recently he just hid the washing up so that she couldn't do it. I think he hid it under his bed or something. And that way she could see it as fun. He was trying to help her after she had fed the family. So the person says, how do we do that without interfering with them or sparking discussion? I believe we should interfere. We should spark discussion. If these are the people that we are living with, we should live to what we believe in. If we believed that we needed to practice Sabbath keeping, we would do so visibly around them, and it would, of course, immediately spark discussion. Even though we weren't going to the methonyms yet, in our own household, there would be the discussion, why aren't you working on Sabbath? Why won't you come and go shopping with me on Sabbath? It would be impossible to avoid. These discussions are impossible to avoid when it comes to people observing you closely. And equality, practiced equality, should be just as visible to the people observing us than it would be if we kept the Sabbath. We should have the same degree of visibility that we believe in equality. What I would not do is start forcing the issue. If we say, I believe in equality, therefore, to my mother, I'm a man, I'm going to cook dinner 3 nights a week. And she says, no, you won't. We can't force her. If they start arguing back and attacking equality, we don't force that upon them. We don't get into arguments and debates. The time for being forceful is the wrong word. The time for bringing this to them as this is a life and death message, you must accept it, that is not now. But we should be willing to use our influence to help them along those steps. Again, it depends entirely on context and who we're talking about. If someone is in a position where they are being abused because they are subjected to mental or physical abuse, then of course that is different again. So asked anonymously, I don't have a concrete answer for you. Again, I would suggest that you speak to your leadership, those that you know fully understand the message and equality correctly, or a continental leader that you're willing to open up to. There's been a couple of questions about unequally yoked. What does it mean to be unequally yoked? Unequally yoked is anyone who is not in the who is not part of the movement that you are part of. Anyone who is Adventist is not part of your kingdom. Anyone who is a Nethinim is not part of your kingdom. You have to be yoked to someone who is a willing participant, member of the same kingdom as you. So back in the history of ancient Israel, it changed through dispensation, but it was always consistent. To be unequally yoked with an unbeliever in the time period of Paul was this, to marry someone who was either Jew or Gentile, because what does Paul say? There is no difference now. Jew and Gentile are the same thing. Neither of them are part of the New Testament church. So when we come to the movement today, 2019 was the cross. The veil was torn. Christ left the sanctuary. To be an Adventist and to be in the world is to be, in some respects, the same thing. We would be unequally yoked, married to either. Neither of them are yet recognizing they have either rejected or not yet brought to a position where they must choose which kingdom they wish to belong to. And I would suggest it is very bad advice to yoke yourself with someone who has not yet decided to be part of your kingdom. Because if they're not going to be part of your kingdom, what's going to happen? Sooner or later, most likely, you will leave this kingdom and go to theirs. It's a life and death message of good advice. In most cases where this is done wrong, it leads to death. I might close with that question. If you don't mind. I've already gone over time. Elder Tabo was very generous. I don't know what else to say. I feel like it's already been said, and anything after now just feels like pleading. But I don't know what else to do. This movement is shrinking and it's going to shrink again. All I can ask is that people trust the cords. Why I don't like Zoom is because this is so one-dimensional. Zoom does not replace person-to-person meetings. It does not replace camp meetings, where I just wish I could come to every individual struggling afterwards and sit with them and show them that I love them and that I care about them. Someone messaged me recently. He was joking. He gave me this joke. He said, I have to stay in the movement because if I don't stay in the movement, I won't get served this food dish that your mother makes that I like. And I wrote back to him and I said, brother, if you leave the movement, come and sit in your car, we'll bring it to you. I don't want people to be left feeling that they aren't cared about. And that is so hard to express over such a one-dimensional platform. I hope that when we come back to outside of this pandemic, people will not treat Zoom as a replacement for camp meetings. It's the best we can do in the time of trouble, at least at this point. But all I can say is please trust the cords. If you kneel with me, we will close in a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we see how you have guided over now more than 3 decades of this movement. We see, Lord, how you are eternal and you have fought this great controversy fight for thousands of years. Your understanding and wisdom is so far beyond ours. Lord, I pray that we will cling to everything that you give us, all of your good advice, all of your laws, all of your cords. May nothing separate us from them. May we realize our only hope is in a new kingdom, not just for us, but all of those people suffering, Lord, all of those who may never hear this message, but who you judge to be suitable members of your new kingdom in heaven. When we find people there from Libya and Yemen who never got to hear this gospel message, who suffered so much on earth, and we can know that we established this kingdom not for ourselves, but for them, for all those who built the ark who never got on it, for Noah who built the ark, not just for him and his family, but for all those that he had care over, that God had given him responsibility over to care for, that he had built the ark for them. May we be willing to do similarly. No earthly kingdom can help those people. May we see their souls as worth equal to our own, equal to the loved ones around us. I pray, Lord, that you help us to get this right, that we can be ready for the increase of knowledge that we are already in, to receive it when it is formalized. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.